Hello and welcome for tuning in. This is episode number 5 of the First Time Seller series. In the last episode, we spoke about what you should be expecting once you're on the market. And in that episode, I spoke about receiving an offer. This episode is going to talk about how you should be looking at offers, what different types of offers there could be, what terms and things like that, and things just to keep in mind before we move on to the next steps of accepting and moving forward from there. So first of all, with an offer, and I think I mentioned this in the last episode, every agent has their own different strategy, but I highly recommend that you do not look at an offer or get presented an offer until it's on a formal residential contract. Now, there's a few reasons for this. The main reason simply being that you know then as the vendor, when you're sitting there and there's an agent in front of you presenting an offer on a contract, that if you're happy with the terms and the price, you can simply sign the contract and you're officially under contract, okay? When you've got offers coming to you on an expressions of interest, you might have 3 or 4 of these. You're then looking at their terms and you know, their details and all these sort of things. And then you might say, okay, I want to accept this one. From then the agent then has to go away, call that buyer and say, hey, they've accepted your offer. And the risk from there is they go, oh, actually, while I was waiting for this one, we found another property and I bought that one on a contract. Or they say, actually, no, we've changed our minds. And there's nothing holding them to your property. There's no legal documents, there's nothing other than an expressions of interest. As a seller, this can be extremely disheartening. I've been on the other end in the past where I've had the agent working for me call me and say, I've got this offer at $490,000. And there was no contract. We've celebrated nearly because we've gone, wow, that's exactly what we wanted. Perfect, we're sold. And then I get a call up later that evening that there was no contract and that the person making the offer was not the decision maker. And that offer was gone. Now, at that time I was the seller and I just went, what? Like, who does that? You get really emotional and these things sort of kick in and it can destroy your experience, especially as a first-time seller, throughout that process. So I highly recommend have that discussion with your agent you decide to hire and ensure that any offers presented to you are on a residential contract. Now, there's a couple different types of residential contracts. There's the regular one for a house, which has no body corporate and is not a community title scheme. And then you've got the community title scheme contract. Both are basically the same, except the second one has the community scheme details and the body corporate information, and you must have the buyers and seller sign a body corporate disclosure statement, which I spoke about right at the very beginning when I spoke about fees. So now we know what the contracts are, we understand how we should be presented an offer. Let's talk about what an offer might look like. Now, if you're selling your first home, the main probably 3, I'd say, terms and conditions you're going to come by will be finance, building and pest, and possibly subject to selling someone's property to purchase yours. Now, that third one is usually only used in properties of a higher value. It's very rare that someone's purchasing a $400,000 home that needs to sell a $400,000 home to buy it. Not impossible, but it's much more often that someone purchasing a $700,000 home must sell their $400,000 home from their first home as well. So they're in a very similar boat to yourself. The subject to selling your home in the current market is a very unattractive offer because although we know that home will sell, there's the potential there's another buyer that has better terms. So in regards to your experience, talk to an agent about how that might work. Your area might be different, but right now, the main 2 that you're going to find in this particular market will be subject to finance and building and pest. And with a lot of the Sydney and Melbourne buyers cashed up coming up here, there's a lot more cash, which I'll talk about soon. So when it comes to finance, on a good finance application, so someone that's been close to formally approved, they've passed the pre-approval, you know, there's not going to be any issues. They've got a big deposit. You know, you might be 21 days finance on a contract. Now that might sound like a long time. That's 3 weeks for someone to get hopefully approved before you can even go unconditional. But that's allowing for the banks right now who are extremely busy and are taking longer than usual. When the market changes again in the future and the banks manage to start coming back on board and keeping up, it will jump back to a regular 14 days. Right now, we're recommending 21 days at a minimum. And then you've got building and pest. Now, building in pest, and you guys might have done this when you purchased your home, unless you built your home, but it's when the buyer will purchase or order a builder and a pest inspector to come through your home before they can officially go unconditional. Now, this allows them to check if there's any issues with the home, termite damage wise, or if there are still active termites. It lets them check, that the electricity is fine, there's no building defects that they should be worried about or that will cost them money after they discover when they move in, and just protects them. It's very rare these days that a contract doesn't have that clause, but it is a possibility that people remove that so that they look better on terms. It's not something to be alarmed about, okay? But in this market, it's going to be recommended by your agent. You get your own anyway. Before you come to the market, we know what we're up against then, and we could possibly rectify any issues before hitting the market as well. And that goes back to a point that I've made in the past, which is not to rush to market. So that's the major thing. So for example, if you're selling a home and you've got a $500,000 offer, so your agent, when they're presenting that, will discuss with you. So you've got a buyer, they're offering $500,000. Their terms are 14 days or 21 days finance, depending on when we're talking about this. 21 days to get finance approved for the sufficient amount to purchase your home. And they have a 7-day building and pest clause. So what this means is that they have to check boxes along the way. And there's deposits we can talk about in person. That's a bit more of a tricky situation. Every contract's different, but these are the main things that will come up. Within that 7 days, they must have a building inspection completed and either A, signed off that they approve with it and they can go unconditional on that term, or B, that they're not happy, there's rectifications that must be done, or that they're going to terminate the contract. Usually it's either A or B. The termination of contract can happen, but usually it's only in extreme circumstances. Most of the time, everything is workable and negotiable if your agent does a good job. So, from once they're unconditional on building and pest, they've still got then 14 days to get finance. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to have to wait the total time to get that in that time. If they're formally approved beforehand and they want to go unconditional, they can by talking to their solicitor. A lot of solicitors do encourage them to wait the full period. I'm not a solicitor, I'm not 100% sure why, but that's a discussion you have with them. But if their buyer is approved before that period, they're able to go unconditional on your home. Now, before I move on, I should probably explain the difference between under contract and unconditional. And the reason being is when you're looking at selling your home and you're talking to agents, there's two different things you're going to see on signboards. There's going to be under contract and there's going to be unconditional. Under contract simply means that you sign a contract with terms and conditions that must be met. These terms and conditions might fall through at any point, and for that reason, there's still conditions that must be met before you're officially sold, before you can have a sold sticker on your signboard, before you can put that happy photo out to say you've officially sold the first home you ever built or bought, which is a super exciting moment. Once you're unconditional, that's it, you're sold, okay? All conditions have been met, whether they were cash, whether they were finance, they've sold their home, whatever it was, all conditions have now been met, and you're moving on to settlement. This is when you start packing your boxes and you start cleaning up your home, getting ready to move out for the new owners to come and take over. So that is that distinguishing factor. The last thing to think about is settlement. So right now, when you're talking finance can take 3 weeks, possibly 4 weeks to get approved. 30-day settlement terms, which is usually the standard, may not be the appropriate time frame. So you may have offers come to you with 40 days, 45 days, possibly even 60 days settlement. It's not something to be alarmed of in this moment. This just means that it gives you guys and the buyers the time to prepare the home, pack bags, get ready to move in, get ready to move out, find a place to live in the meantime, all these sort of things, so that you're not rushing through if it happens last minute. That's what that is. So, a lot of information there. It's not the most exciting topic, but if it's the first time you're selling your home, you're going to get faced with these things, and you want to ensure that you've got the right set of knowledge and the right things to know or talk to your agent about before you move forward. In the next episode, we'll talk about what happens after you're sold. Let's get ready for settlement and let's get ready for the new owners. Thanks for watching this episode. Tune in next time. G'day, thanks so much for checking out this video. If you haven't already, go check out my content. Like, follow, subscribe, and comment. I'd love to talk with you. Thanks again.